For my 12th birthday, I received a canvas that was marked for paint by number. Now, the picture on the top of the box showed a river winding through a meadow, and along the banks of the river were some maple trees in their autumn splendor. I could hardly wait to begin. In my mind's eye, I could see it already finished, even before I picked up the brush. Yes, it was going to be a masterpiece. And so I mounted the canvas on a piece of plywood, 3/4 inch thick plywood, prepared the tubes of oils, and began. But it proved to be a slow process. And I'll tell you why. I could apply only one color at a time. And furthermore, I had to wait until that color dried before I could apply the next color. Well, my progress was far too slow for my temperament. My interest waned. For several months, the canvas sat on the bamboo easel in the corner of the room, until one day I dismantled the whole thing and discarded the unfinished painting. It really is a challenge to see something through all the way to the end. It's always much easier to start than to finish. Just think of all of the dreams that never materialize, or consider the drawers and the cupboards that contain incomplete projects. Among the finest words ever written were those that came from the Apostle Paul not long before he died. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Paul was imprisoned in Rome on 2 different occasions. The first time he was treated with civility. By that I mean his friends could come and visit him in jail and even bring him some of his favorite food. But the second time, it was quite different. This time, Paul was a victim of hatred and harsh treatment. In the interval between those 2 imprisonments, something had happened. And that something had developed a change in the attitude. The great fire of Rome had occurred, and Nero, the Roman emperor, was convinced that the fire had been started by the Christians. Now, this meant that every Christian was treated with suspicion. And anyone who was associating with the Christians was under surveillance. As a result, it was no longer safe to visit Paul in jail. If his friends did, they risked losing their own lives. And so it was that during Paul's second confinement, he sat alone, chained in his darkened cell, waiting for the end, which he knew was inevitable. Not long before he was led to the place of execution outside the city, Paul wrote a letter, part of which was read earlier. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Once, when I was traveling in Switzerland, the newspapers and the TV were filled with a story about a man named Guillemot. During a blizzard, Guillemot had crashed in a small plane in the French Alps. He had sought shelter under the wing of the aircraft. And after the storm had passed, he crawled down the mountainside, and that's when he was rescued. Now, the headlines in the story were all about his survival. During his recuperation, he agreed to an interview with the media, during which a reporter asked him about his perseverance. And this is what he said. "I was just trying to get back to my buddy. So I took a step. Then I took a second step. And another step. Well, that's what pulled me through." That's the secret. Friends, that's the secret. It doesn't matter what the struggle is. Just take one step. And then another step. Isn't that how the toddler learns to walk? One shaky step towards the leg of the chair. Then a second shaky step toward the corner of the table, and so on. In any situation, there's a much better chance of success if you and I adopt the approach of setting small goals in a sequence. When I'm on the treadmill, I think to myself, I can't keep this up for another 10 minutes. And so I negotiate with me. Okay, 10 minutes is too much. How about 1 minute? Can you do 1 minute? Sure, I can do 1 minute. Okay. And I do it. And then I renegotiate. Now, how about another minute? Can you do another minute? Sure, I can do another minute. And before I know it, I've used up the time. Regardless of the challenge that demands so much of your attention right now, regardless of what it is that's consuming so much of your energy these days, there's merit in the approach of taking just one step at a time. Bob and I have had the very good fortune to travel the world with our good friend Jan. And of all the places in the world that pleased Jan the most, it was a little spot in the Scottish Highlands, the road to Tomintoul. Yes, sheep everywhere. Patches of purple heather blooming on the hills around us. That was the ultimate for Jan. And then there came the day when Jan shared with us that her health was compromised. Months later, when we were visiting with her in her home in London, and sitting in easy chairs in her living room, I asked her, "How are you doing? How are you doing?" And with a smile in her eye and a sigh in her voice, she said, "Well, Bob, it's like this. I'm just putting one foot in front of the other. The power to persevere can be found in taking one step at a time. So keep your focus on today, on the present, on the time that is now, and move forward inch by inch, one step at a time. Try not to think about tomorrow, or next week, or next year. Leave the long view to God, to God's care and God's keeping. Oh, I know it's not easy to do. Believe me, I know, because I'm one of those persons who always tries to cross the bridge before I get to it. But I'll tell you, if your journey through life is going to be a journey in faith, then it will consist of taking one step at a time. Do you remember the old blue hymnary? Yes, the one with the print so small that you could hardly read the words. One of my favorite hymns is found in that old blue hymnary, and unfortunately it never got transitioned into Voices United. But it goes like this: Lord, for tomorrow and its need, I do not pray. Keep me, guide me, love me, Lord, just for today. On the 6th of February, we marked a significant milestone. That day, 70 years ago, marked the death of King George VI, and therefore the day that his daughter Elizabeth became our queen. Her preference would have been to live in the country and raise horses, but that was not in her destiny. She had no idea how long she would live, but she did know that, be it long or short, her life would be dedicated to service. Well, here we are. Queen Elizabeth II has served as a reigning monarch for more than 70 years. And in her journey, there have been some political upheavals. There have been one or two intruders in her bedroom. There have been numerous problems in the lives of her children. There have been political crises in some of the countries of the Commonwealth. And so we ask, how did this woman manage 70 years? How did she manage to keep calm and carry on? Well, just consider her style, one thing at a time. Something else which we need to consider when we're thinking about the power to persevere, and that's the impact of those people around us. You and I receive stamina and support from our family members, from our loved ones, from our circle of good friends. All of them have an influence on our thinking and on our behavior. It's the influence that others have on us that qualifies the success of peer support groups like Parents Without Partners, Alcoholics Anonymous, Weight Watchers. Who knows how many times someone has been prevented from cheating on a weight loss diet simply by the dreaded prospect of having to look into the face of the check-in person who has the scales. This illustrates the power that others have on us. This morning, all of us who are participating in worship are different, each one different from the other. We're different in the way we look. We're different in what interests us. We're different in the talents we have. We're different in our preferences. We're different in our habits. But I'll tell you, the one characteristic that we have in common is our belief in a loving God. And the tie that binds us together, each with the other, is our commitment to Jesus, whom we call the Christ. The Christian journey is an adventure intended to be shared. One of the lessons that has been made abundantly clear to us in these days of the COVID pandemic is that the church is so much more than a building. The church is a gathering of believers. Sometimes we gather physically. Sometimes we gather virtually. The church is a group of like-minded persons who ascribe to a certain set of teachings and who seek to exhibit those teachings as best they can in their personal lives. That's why it's a mistake to overlook the relevance of the church. Even though the institution of the church is often handicapped by human weakness, whether we acknowledge it or not, Christians need community. I can't tell you how many times I have sat with people in times of stress and challenge, sickness, loss in death, other challenges, and this person or that person has turned to me and said, "Bob, how do people manage who don't have the church? How do they survive?" The church is this exercise of coming together. People who hold things in common. Life at my cottage on the shores of Lake Huron includes as many beach campfires as time and weather permits. The routine is always the same and the lesson is always dramatic. So everybody has to gather the sticks on the beach and we create a pile. And then Bob lights it aflame. Whenever Atticus or Edmund drags a burning log from the flame, the wood soon loses the glow of its burning and the warmth of its heat. Friends, it's exactly the same for you and for me. In our life journey, if, like Paul, we're going to fight the good fight, finish the race, keep the faith, then we're going to need the power that helps us persevere. And part of that comes to us through our connection with others in the church. So then, what are the takeaways for today? Well, I'm saying there is power to persevere. And that power is available to you and to me if we do two things. One, take one step at a time. Like our friend Jan, put one foot in front of the other. And secondly, connect spiritually with one or more like-minded others. Amen.